Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. So, time to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Sodha. Welcome. Great to see you both. So, to the front pages then, and the Metro to start with, leading on reports that a Sudanese asylum seeker laughed and danced after stabbing hotel worker Rhiannon White 23 times in Walsall last October. The Guardian leads on tensions in Gaza as Israel cuts aid over Hamas's failure to return the remains of hostages. The Financial Times leads on the US Treasury Chief, Scott Bessent, accusing China of harming the world economy with rare earth export curbs, calling it a sign of weakness. The Daily Star leads on the former Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, admitting COVID school closures were decided in just 24 hours. And the Mirror leads on the same story. Its headline, Boris did harm to our kids. The Eye has news that the state pension is set to climb 4.8% as the triple lock rule helps protect over 65s from inflation. Front page of the Express claims there's bad news for the Chancellor, with reports that prices are rising while growth is stalling. Daily Mail leads on warnings of a hard landing for the UK economy as Labour faces grim figures on inflation, unemployment and growth. The Sun says illegal migrants are getting taxpayer-funded art classes, gyms and welfare buddies while awaiting deportation. And the Telegraph leads on the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, warning that the UK has lost control of its borders amid rising migrant crossings. So let's talk then to Ali and Sonia. Welcome to both of you. A mixed bag, really, compared to what we've had recently. And you want to kick off, Ali, with the Daily Telegraph?
Well, this is Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, saying the UK has lost control of its borders. Quite an admission from the Home Secretary here. And she's saying that this is actually going to lead to a lack of trust in the state itself. She's absolutely right with the prescription. What she's actually going to do about it is going to be the proof is going to be in the eating of this pudding. She's talking about bringing in A-level English requirements. She's also talking about reducing the amount of time you can stay post doing your exams if you're a student. So there are various things she's tightening up on, and she understands that this is absolutely fundamental to not only her future career progression, but also the credibility of this government. The only thing that I'm slightly confused about, if she wants to bring in A-level English requirements, if I call up the Royal London Hospital in East London and ask what to do, they say press one for English, two for Bengali. I mean, let's just start there, shall we?
I mean, A-level English, what an extraordinary requirement to get for people wanting to move to this country, whatever skill level you are. I mean, that's simply not workable, is it?
Well, it will probably mean that fewer people get visas to come in for skilled jobs where there is, demand for those skills. I would say that the most important thing is that people have good functional English rather than, is it a very advanced level? Who knows how many of us would pass A-level English these days? So I think what Shabana Mahmood, she's seen as, a sort of up-and-coming member of the cabinet. She's sort of made an ascent. She's now got one of the 4 great offices of state. And what she's trying to do here, her position is really key because, as Ali says, the fortunes of the Labour government and how they do against reform, they've decided to say that reform is their main challenge at the next election. A lot of that is to do, first of all, with the economy and second of all, with migration. Now, what she's got is she's got 2 issues. She's got an illegal immigration issue, which is that rates of legal immigration were incredibly high under Boris Johnson when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. And a lot of those people are set to qualify for indefinite leave to remain very soon because you have to be here 5 years for that. So she's got a whole set of policies to say, well, it's going to be harder for you to achieve that. Then she's got the issue of illegal migration and small boats and the people crossing the channel. And all her policies, you'll know, are mostly aimed at the legal migration. It's the illegal migration issue. The small boats is much, much more difficult that no government has been able to crack. Rishi Sunak hasn't, Keir Starmer hasn't, and it's the thing that Nigel Farage is making political hay out.
Even though the numbers are so much lower in terms of the small boats compared to the legal migration. Let's go to the economy, shall we? Big report from the IMF, their assessment of how the UK is doing. We know Rachel Reeves in Washington for this. And the budget is a-coming, as they say. So what have we learnt today, and what do the figures look like for the UK?
Not brilliant is the answer. Two things the IMF is saying. One is that inflation in the UK is going to be the highest for any advanced economy, and also growth is going to be the worst in the West of any advanced economy in the G7 as well. Not a great backdrop. We've also got 2.7 trillion of public debt, 300 billion of borrowing on the back of COVID. Things are looking pretty dire at the moment. And now we've got the Chancellor obviously facing a 30 billion black hole ahead of the budget on November the 26th, and that's at the lower end of expectations. I mean, it could be up to 40 or 50 billion if she wants to give herself a bit of fiscal headroom, so she doesn't have to come cap in hand every year and do the same thing. I mean, it was only in the last budget that we were being told that this 40 billion that she raised in taxes was a one-off thing, and now we're being told that actually, you know, she's going to have to come back for more. And what it's probably going to mean is, and there's a lot of kite flying that goes on by the Treasury in the run-up to this. They try and test all sorts of policies to see what the reaction is going to be. To me, it seems very simple. It's going to be the middle classes who are doing reasonably OK, who are going to be absolutely squeezed by this. They're already being squeezed, those who send their kids to private school, with the 20% VAT thing. The very rich can afford to go away. The non-doms has already been... They're leaving. They're leaving in droves, and they're voting with their feet there, going to Dubai or Milan or Monaco. It is the middle classes that are going to be really hammered by what is about to come, I expect.
Yeah, Jersey as well, I heard today. Actually, the number of jobless hits a four-year high as well. And in fact, that was something specifically mentioned by the IMF about the changes that Rachel Reeves made to national insurance contributions and the broader impact of that. Daily Express, Reeves blow as prices rise and growth stalls. And prices rising just means everything is getting more consistently still more expensive for all of us, and interest rates, they're being told, you know, should not change because of inflation pressures.
That's right. And I think it's fair to say that neither the Daily Mail nor the Daily Express are the biggest fans of the Labour government. So I think it is fair to point that out. But both papers are right, that the economic outlook is quite grim. I wouldn't put it all at Labour's door. I think the UK economy has had a number of long-term structural issues. We've had our productivity growth has been too sluggish. This is why living standards have basically been stagnant for 20 years, and why people are not feeling well off at the end of the month. And Brexit was part of that. These long-term issues are part of that. The pandemic is part of that. However, I do think that Labour has done two things to make its life worse. First of all, I think some of the decisions that Rachel Reeves has taken, so, for example, loading that national insurance rise on employers rather than just generally increasing income tax. They had to do that because of what they said in their manifesto, but I think it has had an impact, potentially, on employment figures. And the second thing is they sort of came in telling voters, vote for us and we'll fix it. And I'm afraid that the mess that is the British economy at the moment is not fixable on a 3-year timescale. It's going to take a lot longer than that. So they have set expectations very high. Voters quite fairly think that they were going to vote for Labour and the economy was going to be fixed in 5 years.
And what
fortunately, these problems are quite long-standing.
And what Rachel Reeves will say in Washington, I will showcase Britain's commitment to fiscal responsibility while creating the conditions to boost productivity, you've mentioned, attract investment and secure our place as a strong and credible partner in a stable global economy. You know, people speculating whether long-term damage was done after Truss. Did they not have to recall Kwasi Kwarteng from there to get fired? You know, the budget decisions that were taken, longer-term budget worries, how broke are we? We see what's happening in France as well. In the meantime, the Eye says, who's protected here? And it looks like it's pensioners again, is it?
Yeah, it is. And look, this triple lock thing is going to be coming again, because what it's saying, the Eye paper here, is that new wage growth figures mean pensions are likely to rise higher than predicted. Now, the triple lock is the higher of average earnings, 2.5%, and inflation. And this is just cast iron for all political parties, because older people vote. Younger people don't vote in the same numbers, and the pensioners are very, very strong as a group. And we can see that in the winter fuel debate that happened. The reality is, though, someone somewhere has got to level with the British public that we can't continue to live beyond our means. And it's deeply unpopular. I love pensioners as well. My mother's a pensioner. I get it. But we just simply can't afford all of this. We cannot afford it.
There is a bit of an outbreak of agreement around this table because I agree the pension triple lot was originally brought in to sort of ratchet up pensions because they were too low compared to earnings. They weren't rising as fast as earnings. It's done its job. Pensions are now at a really good level and there isn't really a justification for the triple because we don't need pension growth to keep outpacing.
If you're just living on the pension, you've still got a very low income.
You do.
Yes. That is the point.
You do, but then... Sorry.
But the problem is that we've had working age benefits cut significantly. We've got people paying higher, high taxes as a proportion of their income because of the state of the economy. So you do have to pay... And look at the deal that young people are getting. Young people are racking up debts when they go to university, tuition fees of, £40,000, £50,000. They can't get on the housing ladder. Something's got to give.
And they're showing up as part of the unemployment numbers as well now, quite significantly. In the meantime, the Financial Times talks about where we're going to see nibbling around the edges, potentially, because we can't tackle those three big taxes again. Reeves renews her focus on cutting the cash ISA, which will be, I would imagine, quite unpopular for people. When should we perhaps be saving for our old age?
Well, this is the clown show element of it. I mean, you've just talked about the fact that there'll be people who are at the lower end who are surviving on the state pension will really struggle. Well, we're not saving enough in the country either. Now, I understand that we need to invest and we need to grow and we need to boost the economy, and that means people have to actually spend. I get that point. But our savings ratio is very, very poor in this country too. Now, if the Chancellor is going to be saying that you can't save £20,000 in a cash ISA, she's potentially thinking about slashing it to half that amount, fine, but people aren't saving enough for their own retirements today. Look, I was at a dinner at the Mansion House the other night with the Lord Mayor. He was basically saying we need to invest more in growth economies and start-up enterprises in this country. It's very low. Pension fund money should go there. He's right. It needs to be balanced.
I know, just as the warnings come that there might be an AI tech bubble. You were trying to urge people to put their money into stocks. It's scary for people when they're not putting much in.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to talk about that. We're running. I need to move on. I do apologise. Next up, we will be discussing the story on the front of The Guardian. Its headline, Grooming Inquiry Stalls amid a search for a panel chair.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest 'Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here, drama over, full stop. Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
She's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Ali Miraj and Sonia Sodha. Welcome back to both of you. Sonia, let's go to The Guardian, shall we? And the national inquiry into grooming gangs is stalling because they can't find anybody to head it. Why is that?
That's right. So this is something that victims have been pressing for, and the government eventually had to U-turn. It was a very contested issue because you had Elon Musk bring it up and say, this is terrible, what's been going on in the UK. The government said, no, we've already had an independent inquiry into child sex abuse. They've looked into grooming gangs. But if you actually go and read that report, it didn't look into the phenomenon of grooming gangs in detail. So I think victims are right that there needed to be a national inquiry. Now, the issue is that it's proving extremely hard to find a judge who's willing to take on chairing this inquiry. If we look at the independent inquiry on child sex abuse, it was this huge inquiry that took years, and they went through 3 chairs before they got to Alexis Jay, who ended up chairing the whole thing. And this story quotes a lawyer who represents some of the grooming gang victims, and he's saying he's not surprised that it's so difficult to find someone because you're looking at an incredibly contested issue. So why does these grooming gangs phenomenon exists, and it is linked to race because we know it was predominantly men of a particular ethnic background who did this offending from particular sort of Pakistani origins. And I think probably even judges are wary of touching it because it is so highly contested.
Yes.
But who does that fail? Again, it fails the victims.
But you see, this is the thing, and I always have great respect for Sonia, but the very fact that we're saying it's contested, and I understand where you're coming from, Sonia, shows me the failure of where we've got to. I mean, this shouldn't be contested at all. It should be a case of, look, this happened, men of Pakistani origin were involved, this happened on an industrial scale, scores and scores of girls were groomed systematically for years because they were regarded as white and from broken homes in many cases in care, and they were regarded as fodder for this. And this nonsense was going on systematically for years. If they can't find a chair, I've got a chair for them, and I'm just going to volunteer her against her will. Maggie Oliver, the detective from Greater Manchester Police, who tried to raise this for 18 months, gave up in disgust, left the force because no one took it seriously, no one was investigating it properly, and she set up her own charity to go and support the victims of these grooming gangs.
Well, you know she'd be a witness in this, so that would be impossible, but I get the drift.
You
anyway.
get the drift.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Telegraph, shall we? Civil service mutiny over this Chinese spy scandal blame game. I know we had reports of this last night. Anyway, where are we at, Sonia?
So we are now at, so essentially you've had a government minister, Dan Jarvis. So there's this big question about why the CPS dropped this case against these 2 men who were accused of essentially espionage, running espionage for China. And the government said, the CPS said it's because no one from the government came along to give us evidence on why China is an enemy or a national security threat. And this government is saying, oh no, it's not to do with us. And in the latest statement that we had from the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, he's laid the door at a man called Matthew Collins, who's a Deputy National Security Advisor. Now, this has set off outrage because this guy is a civil servant, right? You don't normally name civil servants and say it's all their fault because they're not able to speak out. And so we don't really know if it was all his fault. And you've got two former cabinet secretaries who basically are men who've led the civil service come out and say it's completely unacceptable that ministers are just basically saying, naming a civil service official who can't actually come out and speak out and say whether the account is right or defend himself.
I think it's actually very worrying, honestly, because I remember the days of Sir Humphrey and Yes Minister, where you never heard the name of a civil servant publicly at all. You didn't. They were meant to be seen and not heard at all. And this is absolutely ridiculous. The government needs to take responsibility for calling China a security threat or not blaming it on a civil servant who's doing his job and throwing him under the bus.
Well, they have sort of partially done that, haven't they? And when they get to the last story, the Daily Star, which is about education, schools, COVID and Gavin Williamson.
Yes, that's right. So the COVID inquiry is still ongoing. Gavin Williamson has been giving evidence, lots of questions to him about the decisions around how schools were shut, how long they were shut for, etc. It's really revealing, I think. It's hard to think back to that period, but there was a lot of chaos and, you know, Williamson actually sort of hinted that the decision to close schools was sort of taken in 24 hours. There are really big questions because at the end of the day, the government reopened pubs before schools and that had a huge impact on children's education.
Yeah. It only took them 5 years to admit they messed up, is how the Daily Star is putting it. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Quite a mixture of stories tonight,
Real
certainly.
Mix, yeah.
Ali and Sonia, thank you. We will see you for more in Sky News at 11. And also our top story tonight, cracks showing in the Gaza peace deal as Israel restricts aid crossing into Gaza over the failure by Hamas to return the bodies of hostages.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
It is 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview. Our top story. Israel restricts aid to Gaza over what it says is Hamas's failure to return the bodies of hostages. Tonight, Hamas hands over more captives' remains, though, which are arriving in Tel Aviv. Israel warns it will spare no effort to return them all. More pressure on Hamas tonight as President Trump threatens violence if its members refuse to lay down their weapons.
If they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm.
Tonight we ask, is the Gaza peace deal in danger of unravelling? Also ahead, pressure on the Chancellor as the IMF warns that the UK will have the highest inflation in the G7 this year and next.
I'm gonna come to England. I'm gonna mother.
An asylum seeker who threatened to kill Nigel Farage is jailed for 5 years. Well, over the next hour, we will be discussing today's news with our reviewers, Ali Miraj and Sonia Sodha. And later, we'll have a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Well, let's bring you an update on the news coming from Tel Aviv, where the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages have now arrived at the National Centre for Forensic Medicine. Saluted, as you can see, by those in the street to welcome home those who had been lost for 2 years. The 4 tonight bring now the total to 8 who have been returned by Hamas. Certainly during negotiations in Egypt, they had implied they knew where the bodies of 12 hostages were. There are others, of course, who it is suggested might take weeks or months to find under the rubble. 20 remain, it is believed, in Gaza. And that comes, as we are told, that the first of the funerals for one of the hostages returned last night will take place tomorrow. Well, certainly the hope and optimism which greeted the peace deal in Gaza yesterday is being sorely tested tonight. Israel halving the amount of aid entering Gaza because of what it says is Hamas's failure to return all the bodies of hostages. Hamas, as we saw there, has transferred the remains of 4 more hostages this evening, the bodies of some 20 others then still unaccounted for. President Trump added to the pressure on Hamas tonight with a demand for the remains to be released and with a warning of violence if the group refuses to disarm. So is the Gaza peace deal unravelling? Well, over the next hour, we will bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages and the views of our paper reviewers, the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj and the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Sodha. First, though, let's hear from our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons.
In Gaza, the dream is of a better life, but the spectre of death hangs over everything and everyone. Somewhere amid this destruction are the remains of Israeli hostages, and who knows how many Gazan bodies also lie under this rubble. More grief delivered here, the bodies of 45 Palestinian prisoners brought to Gaza by the Red Cross. This woman came in hope. 6 of her children have already died, and her son has been missing since the start of the war.
It's been 2 years since my son went missing, and to this day I don't know if he's a martyr or a prisoner. There's no one I didn't ask about him. When we heard today that the Red Cross was coming with some bodies, I came to see if my son was one of them.
The ceasefire is holding, but it's being tested. Both sides accuse the other of breaches. The Israeli military killed at least 6 people. It says they crossed into a forbidden zone. Hamas said that was a violation. Israel says it will delay reopening the crucial Rafah crossing until Hamas does more to return the dead hostages and will allow in only half the number of aid trucks that it had agreed. And Hamas responded to that by transferring the remains of 4 more dead hostages. What's obvious is that aid is needed.
We would urge the Israeli authorities to not use aid in this manner, to open all of the crossings as soon as possible and allow aid to flow into the Gaza Strip unfettered.
But assuming this deal does live on, what of the future? The US president adamant that Hamas will lay down its weapons, come what may.
We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
Some of the fruits of this deal are already being seen. Akram was detained at the start of the war. Now he's been reunited with his family.
We were beaten mercilessly to the point of death. Many of our fellow prisoners were martyred before our eyes as a result of those fatal blows. After such beatings, we would cry out to the prison guards for help, but they would respond with cold indifference, saying, "Let him die."
Sky News has put these allegations to the Israeli authorities. Across Gaza, people are on the move, returning to homes that they hope are still standing. A blighted land held together by a fragile ceasefire. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's see how tomorrow's newspapers are reacting to that story. There's the front page of The Guardian reporting on rising tensions in Gaza as Israel cuts aid over Hamas's failure to return the hostage remains. The Times covers Hamas executing suspected collaborators amid a ceasefire strain, with Trump vowing to disarm Hamas. And The Telegraph carries the same story as The Times. Hamas peace starts with mass executions. I mean, people will have seen the pictures on social media, horrendous pictures, and in news outlets, apologies. It's not a great start, really, for Hamas, is it? Even if they blame them for whatever.
No, and it's a reminder of the terrorist organisation they are. And let's not forget, when they say collaborators, they mean people resisting Hamas, this dreadful terrorist organisation. So,
and some of those groups have been, supported by Israel as well.
Yeah. It's a resistance, Palestinians resisting this terror organisation, Hamas, that has sort of ruled through fear and terror. So, I mean, I've sort of tried to avoid looking at too many images of this, as I'm sure many viewers probably have as well, but you can't help but see some of the images, and it's dreadful. And I think it's a real reminder of who Hamas are. But the big question now is obviously, what does demilitarisation of Gaza look like? Who's going to achieve it? You had sort of Trump kind of issuing that sort of almost throwaway threat, just saying, well, if they don't disarm, we're going to do it. I mean, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that the US sort of going in, international troops going in? It's not exactly clear. But I think, I was surprised at what Trump was able to achieve. I have to admit, I was sceptical. It was a big achievement, but the issue is that, the way that agreement was through, quite a broad terms, lots of principles in there. It's going to get much harder as people sort of try to hammer out the detail. And, you've seen that with Hamas, the Hamas executions. We've got, Israel and Hamas sort of saying they can't return all the bodies yet. Israel believe they do have remains, that Hamas are playing games, and therefore saying, well, we're going to reduce the amount of aid that goes through until you return those bodies to us, because it was part of the deal. So I think there's just a lot of people watching on, just keeping everything crossed that this deal holds.
Yes, and just on the shootings, Donald Trump was asked about that tonight. He said initially Hamas took out a couple of gangs that were very, very bad. They killed a number of gang members. That didn't bother me much, to be honest with you. So he slightly dismissed it, which looked like a very violent beginning to what was the hopes of a ceasefire and, Hamas giving up power, effectively, which is the demands of this deal, isn't it? In the meantime, we see 4 remains of hostages returned. They will have to go through formal identification. There have been mistakes in the past of bodies sent by Hamas, really horrendously for families. And the first of the funerals will take place tomorrow. So this process continues really for the Israelis. I think 45 Palestinian bodies will also return tonight as part of that.
It's a very delicate moment, and Sonia is absolutely right. This is just the beginning of a very long and arduous and it's going to be a very fraught process. Look, credit to Trump for getting the guns to fall. Well, not completely fall, because there have been more people killed today when there were incursions into the Israeli line within Gaza, and the Rafah crossing's not been completely opened up either, because they're saying you need to return the 28 bodies of the dead people. And Hamas is saying, well, it's very difficult to find them. We're not exactly sure where they all are. One of the biggest challenges here is going to be a power vacuum. Power vacuum in Gaza, because until you actually get this board for peace up and running, and now apparently 15 Palestinians have been identified by Egyptian foreign minister has said that 15 Palestinians are going to be brought into this thing, and they've been approved by Israel. I mean, look, a lot of people will say, well, hang on, why is Israel approving this either? So the people who want to undermine this deal will be saying, well, hang on a second, there should be self-determination for the Palestinians here. This is all a bit of a colonial imposition. So that line's also spreading around. So this is really fraught with difficulty. And in the meantime, if Hamas is like popping off 7 people today, 33 apparently killed by Hamas deterrence force, in a power vacuum, I mean, this is going to be really, really hard. Yeah. I mean, apparently as part of the deal, Hamas are meant to step down, give up their weapons, and then be granted, those who want to, safe passage out of the territory. We'll have to see how it develops.
And that's the danger of this top-down approach to sorting this out, that the plans to very quickly get some sort of protection force in, so you don't have the gangs in charge in pockets, and then Hamas trying to reassert control. But none of that's been worked out, and so you sit here watching people return to nothing.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, those pictures just really kind of, yes, you can see on paper part of the deal is there's got to be investment to rebuild Gaza, but you see the pictures of the devastation that's been left. And I mean, my goodness, what it's going to take to get it back even halfway to what it was before this awful war started is dreadful.
Absolutely. So $50 billion is the estimated amount to be spent. You have this sort of slightly ironic position where America provides weapons to Israel, Israel does the damage, and then they expect the
Europeans will pick it up.
Well, or the Arab states to pick it up, or the Gulf states to pick it up, which is, you know, how long will that commitment last?
I mean, the Arab states, sorry, I was going to say the Arab states have an interest in securing peace in the region because they don't want spillover effects into their own territories, with Palestinians relocating as refugees, because that will be turbulent for them as well with their own domestic populations. So they have an interest in doing it, but it's going to take ages. And obviously at the moment, people have been in a flight response because they've been trying to stay alive. Now, if the guns are effectively falling silent for a while, you then go back to your thing, you're totally bewildered about what you're going to do next because your house has been completely destroyed. There are going to be sanitation issues, feeding issues, I mean, all sorts of things. And you need to get aid in fast. Gaza, Hamas needs to be, there's some sort of stabilisation force, needs to go in there to take over.
And I heard one estimate today, sorry, Sonia, which was 50 to 60 million tonnes of bombed out, you know, crushed building, concrete, metal, the lot, but with bodies under it. So how do you tackle that?
I don't know. I was just going to say, I think it's really important as well to remember the complicity of Hamas in this destruction too. It was they who launched that killing spree in Israel on October the 7th, and it's they who, I think, they did not seek to protect their citizens in the way that this conflict was conducted. They used citizens, and so they have got a lot to answer for in the scale of destruction too.
Yes. But maybe you see, I think Hamas has been absolutely, completely negligent in protecting its own people. I mean, it's 65,000 people or 67,000, whatever the numbers are. We don't know exactly the numbers. But they could argue that their aim was to try and influence the opinion of the world in their favour. Now, if that was the benchmark, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Hamas. I have no desire to. But if that was the benchmark, they would say it may have been reasonably successful.
But isn't it awful to do that by sacrificing the lives of Palestinians? Yeah.
And the Times picks up the headline, Hamas kills its enemies. But it does say that the Egyptian foreign minister has said a 15-member Palestinian technocratic committee had now been selected to administer post-war Gaza, and that all names had been vetted by Israel and approved by all Palestinian factions, including Hamas. And he went on to say that Hamas members accepted the plan and would have no role in the transitional period. So hopefully that can get up and running quickly.
Definitely, because at the same time in this piece, you've got experts saying, a Middle Eastern expert saying that, it isn't anarchy in Gaza, it's Hamas reasserting control. So this is the issue. You've got what's officially going on, but what authority is this Council of 15 going to have in Gaza, and to what extent is Hamas going to cede authority? They're already looking to regain authority.
OK, we will keep a very close eye on that and any developments as well. So thank you for that. But let's move on to the Chancellor. Pressure on her tonight after global economists warned that the UK's rate of inflation will surge to the highest level in the G7 group of nations, both this year and next. The International Monetary Fund says soaring food costs are largely to blame. But there's better news for Rachel Reeves on growth, with the IMF revising up its forecast for this year. Well, let's get more then. And for his assessment, our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has this.
So the International Monetary Fund is meeting in Washington. As part of this big annual meeting, it brings out this. It's called the World Economic Outlook. It's essentially its 6 monthly opportunity to look at the state of the global economy. And it's worth reflecting, first of all, on what it says about the UK and other major economies around the world. Basically, the main thing people focus on with this is what it means for the growth rate. How much is income growing across the economy? And you can compare the UK with other countries around the world. And this is showing you, look, the UK versus G7 nations. This is something that I imagine Rachel Reeves will be very pleased about. The UK is the second strongest growing economy in the G7 this year. So 1.3% growth versus 2% in the US, and weaker growth throughout the rest of the G7, those industrialised economies around the world. And next year, I mean, it's not quite as strong as the rest next year, still 1.3%. Canada's a bit stronger. The US is stronger still. But again, it's kind of top half of the table. And I imagine the Chancellor will be pleased with that. She'll be talking about that. It's the kind of thing you probably might expect to hear her talk about when it comes to the budget. But here's the concern, OK? This is looking at overall growth rates, so overall gross domestic product growth. But you need to divide that by head of the population to get a sense of what it actually means for living standards. And of course, you know, the population in the country has been growing, largely thanks to immigration. And here's what happens if you do that. So if you divide these numbers by head of the population to get GDP per capita, look at the red bar, same year, OK, so 2026. And actually, GDP per capita, because of the higher population, is the weakest in the G7 in 2026. And actually, that's the number that most people will really focus on to give you a sense of just how much better off or worse off you're feeling. So that's GDP. How about inflation, OK? Because there's a lot of focus on what's going on with prices. You remember that big peak we had not long ago, the cost of living crisis. This is showing you inflation in the US, the euro area and China. And it's worth just looking at the UK and comparing the UK to other countries. Because look, here we are in red, and the UK had a higher peak, so this is prices going up, higher than most other countries around the world. But even more importantly, where we are right now, look, the UK is higher than the US, it's higher than the euro area, it's higher than China. And what's perhaps concerning is that the IMF says that's going to continue in the next few years. So this is, again, their forecast for inflation for this year, and the UK has the highest inflation rate in the G7, considerably higher than many in the euro area. And next year also, so all the bars are lower, so that's one thing. Inflation is coming down across the board, but still the UK higher than all the others. And it's not just inflation, it's also long-term interest rates. You remember, we've been focusing a lot, haven't we, on what's going on with those bond yields, because it matters, it affects the interest costs we're all having to pay. Well, again, here's the US, here's the euro area, here's Japan, and here is the UK. And these charts, and this is charts produced by the IMF, are the kind of thing that are going to be discussed in Washington, where the Chancellor is going. And I imagine she'll have to explain, you know, part of the reason for why the UK is an outlier when it comes to interest rates and when it comes to inflation and what's going on with growth as well.
Ed Conway with a fascinating analysis there. So tomorrow's newspapers, there is the Daily Mail. Labour isn't working again, warning of a hard landing for the UK economy as Labour faces grim figures on inflation, on unemployment and on growth. Front page of the Express claims there's bad news for the Chancellor, with reports that prices are rising while growth is stalling. And the FT looks at Rachel Reeves's focus on a cut to the £20,000 cash limit for ISAs as budget day approaches. Let's go back then to Ali and Sonia. They're fascinating from Ed Conway there. Growth overall versus growth per capita, per head of population, and we sink right down the charts. Rachel Reeves heading to Washington for the IMF. You know, what does she say? What does she need to say to them and to us, effectively?
Well, she needs to actually try and give an impression of confidence, which, unfortunately, the markets at the moment are giving their own verdict. I mean, we have the highest bond yields in a generation at the moment, so the borrowing costs are very high. And when you're borrowing 2.7 trillion of public debt, you've got a problem because you're actually spending more on servicing that debt. A large proportion, by the way, about close to 700 billion, of which is inflation linked. You're spending more than most government departments on just servicing your debt in interest costs. So those people who are telling us when interest rates are like, oh yeah, fill your boots with loads of cheap debt, people never realise that interest rates can go up as well as down. And at the moment, when you've got inflation, which is stubbornly high, still going to be the highest in the advanced economies, and also a growth rate which is absolutely woeful. And Ed Conway's analysis there showed when you divide it by the population, which is a little thing people forget about, GDP per capita is in the gutter. All this is going to do is help Nigel Farage.
Interesting, yeah. And I just want to briefly mention France in this context. The reappointed, having resigned, Prime Minister Le Cornu, having to abandon, so the suggestion is, the changed retirement age for French people, trying to get to 64 from 62. Wouldn't 62 be lovely, everybody? But anyway, because they can't get that through with their 118% GDP.
We're just not serious.
Voters really don't like grappling with the reality, which is that there's lots of advanced economies struggling with growth. They're ageing societies, so that means that when you look 20, 30 years in the future, the health and care needs of older people are going to be much greater. So and there's fewer working age people to pay the tax for the NHS and social care. So people in their teens today are going to have to be paying higher taxes if we want the NHS to stand still, the level of provision. That is just quite unappealing mathematics, essentially, however you look at it. Voters politicians, but the problem is politicians don't really want to tell the hard truths to voters, and voters don't want to hear them.
They don't want to hear them.
So, you know, you've got that situation in France. In the UK, we've got the pensions triple lock, actually meaning that the state pension is going up much faster than, for example, working age benefits.
It's on the front of the eye if we dig it out while you're talking.
Indeed,
yeah.
So you know, it's we need to make some tough choices as a country because we do not have the rates of growth that we had pre-financial crisis. When the city was powering our growth, it was covering up all manner of sins across the rest of the economy. You know, too low levels of business investment, sluggish productivity growth. In 2008, that was all laid bare through the financial crisis, and then living standards have essentially stagnated. So if you take somebody, you know, the average person, they're no better off in 2025 than they were in 2008, and that is why people feel hard up.
Sonia is raising some really very profound points here, because if you take a step back...
Thank you, Ali.
But this is serious stuff. Because
I'll take profound.
This is serious stuff because no one wants to face up to this. Now, she's going to the IMF, Rachel Reeves. There are big challenges. The demographic challenge, as Sonia said. There's also a digitalisation challenge with AI and joblessness that's going to come down there. No one's talking about...
And yet we're looking at the American economy, which is being driven by an AI tech revolution.
AI tech revolution there. No one's talking about the displacement of jobs that's going to happen and thinking about that at all. And also
we will be affected.
On this net zero thing that we have, I believe in climate change. I believe that it's a real thing, and we need to tackle it. But cheap energy fuels growth. At the moment, there is a feeling amongst a lot of business people that we have got this in the wrong place at the moment. This balance, this focus on net zero is not helping us. We've got the highest energy costs amongst many countries in the developed world. These massive gargantuan challenges, we're just not thinking about. No one's talking about them.
Yes, I think Donald Trump has just cancelled a massive solar farm, hasn't he, in the States? There we go. Daily Express as well, picking up on inflation. Literally, the Bank of England being warned by the IMF not to tamper again with interest rates. So we're stuck with interest rates as they are and growth stalling. If we go to the Financial Times, though, you know, we're starting to see about how Rachel Reeves might fiddle around the edges again in the budget. And this time it's once again putting the cash ISA back on the table, just as really genuinely we should all probably be trying to, if it's possible, trying to save whatever you can for your old age.
Well, the economic arguments for this, and this is why the Treasury wants to do it, is so at the moment you can save up to £20,000 a year, and that can go either into a cash ISA or a stocks and share ISA. And what the Treasury really wants to do is to reduce the amount you can save into the cash ISA, so it pushes people towards putting their savings into stocks and shares. And economically, this is thought to be a good thing because that might help to, investing more in the British economy might help push up kind of our growth rates. The issue is, so first of all, this is going to be incredibly unpopular. And we know that Rachel Reeves has already done some very unpopular things. And, Labour may live to regret it, I suppose, electorally, because it's going to be, you have to be really well off, let's face it, to be saving £20,000 a year. Yeah. But you're quite a noisy voter if you're that well off. And it's probably not going to be that popular with people. And there's a question there as well. If somebody was going to put it in a cash ISA, will they actually put it in a stocks and share ISA, or will they actually just put it in a bank account instead? Because there's a lot of people who've got quite a low tolerance for risk and don't want to take the risk. You always see those ads, don't you, on TV? If you invest in stocks and shares, your money can go down as well as go up. So it's interesting that she's talking about it. I think mostly...
Talking about it again.
I think mostly because I actually think it would be really unpopular, even if it is the right thing to do economically. And Labour have done a bit of that recently, and it hasn't gone well for them.
These funds will put money into American companies as well. There's already a warning about the AI tech stock bubble around. So there will be nervousness, I think, with people. But very quickly,
they want to try and move things so that we are investing more domestically in companies that can actually drive growth. But it is about a question about risk appetite. You've got to have the risk appetite to lose that money, potentially, as well as gain. If you don't have it, people will want to save it in a cash ISA. Now, she penalises people on that. People are already struggling to save already.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be deeply unpopular.
I feel you're about to head back the table of frustration. Maybe we call a halt to this section. Anyway, lots still to come in our programme, including an Afghan migrant who came to the UK on a small boat has been jailed for 5 years after threatening to kill Nigel Farage.